God set us free to sin? In the last devotion that we had, we learned that God has given us grace. Grace itself is a gift to us. It is a free gift to us. That means that we can't earn grace. We can't. We can't do anything to earn it. No. Question, does that mean that we can continue to sin for the rest of our lives because we have free grace? The answer is no. And that's what we talked about and learned in our last video. What then? Are we to sin because we are not under law but under grace? By no means. In Romans chapter 6, in the last half, Paul, he emphasizes the same thing that he did in the first half of chapter 6. Same thing. But he uses a different metaphor this time. Very different. Before, he used the metaphor of death, death to sin. Now, he is using the metaphor of slavery to sin. We are not bound by the law, no. The reason is because grace has poured over all of our sin. For sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under law, but under grace. God's grace, wow, He has poured it on us. That doesn't mean that His law is thrown out. No, it means that we are not bound to the law. And that means that God has set us free from trying to obey the law so that we can finally have salvation. Salvation itself is from God Himself. The only reason is because of His grace. We need to remember that grace means undeserved favor. And that means that we cannot earn it. Earn it? No, we can't earn it. We cannot earn salvation. So how do we become saved? How? Through God's grace alone. Hallelujah! Now, our relationship with God, it is based on what? It's based on grace now, not based on the law. Now, question. Are we still in slavery? Yes. We are slaves to what? Righteousness. And that is a blessing. It's a wonderful slavery. And having been set free from sin, have become slaves of righteousness. This slavery to sin that leads to death, is not like the slavery to righteousness. It brings life. Now let's apply this to our Christian life. The Apostle Paul, he did not say that God's law was to be thrown out. No, he said that the law itself is holy. So the law is holy, and the commandment it is holy, and righteous and good. Question. Did God give us the law? Yes. But why? Well, the law leads us to know His ways. It'd be silly for us to think that God would free us from the slavery of being bound to the law and then we just go ahead and sin. That'd be ridiculous. The law is important. We can trust in the law. I'm talking about God's commandments. And He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets." Love God and love others. That's what Jesus said that we need to do. We must seriously pray that God will help us to learn to love His commandments. Before, I said to trust in the law. What? Well, remember, God's grace saved us. And in our heart, He changed our heart. And that's why we are not enthusiastic to continue in sin as we were before in our old life. We can't. Now, we are enthusiastic to obey God's law for guidance, not for salvation. If God had not saved us, if He had not changed our heart, we would not be able to obey His law anyway. In Romans chapter 8, verse 7, Paul says that the mind is set on the flesh and is hostile to God, for it does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. See, we cannot. God must first save us from the darkness of sin. We're saved, period. Then we obey. Coram Deo.